Kevin didn't even bother hiding the documents. That was the part that got me later. He didn't stash them, didn't lock them up, didn't even think to shred them. He just left them out like grocery lists because in his mind I wasn't supposed to see them. I wasn't supposed to be home. But I was. And once I picked up that folder, once I saw what my own family had planned behind my back, everything else, the lies, the party, the invasion of my home, it all made sense. But let me back up. My name's Ryan Carter. I'm 29 and I work in oncology research, cutting-edge cancer treatment protocols, the kind of stuff that takes up your nights and shreds your sleep schedule but might, just maybe, change the world. I'd been out in Chicago for a medical symposium, one of those weeks where you're more PowerPoint than person. I left Kevin a message before I flew out. House is yours for a week. Water the plants, don't break anything, and definitely no parties. He responded with a thumbs-up emoji. Real heartfelt stuff. The plan was to stay out until Sunday. But I caught an earlier flight Friday night. No warning, no fanfare. Just me, tired, dragging my suitcase up the steps, looking forward to my own bed. Instead, I opened the door and walked into what looked like a catering truck exploded inside my living room. Balloons. Loud music. Half-drunk relatives I hadn't seen since our dad's funeral. Laughter that died the second someone noticed me standing in the entryway. Kevin's wife dropped a wine glass when she saw me. My mom turned pale. And Kevin? He froze, mid-toast, holding a beer in one hand and my coffee mug in the other. You weren't supposed to be back yet, he said. Right? I wasn't supposed to come home. And they weren't supposed to get caught. You ever walk into your own home and realize you're the stranger? Not just forgotten guest, kind of stranger, I mean fully erased, like someone went through your life with a broom and swept you out of the picture. That was me, standing in the doorway watching my own family pretend I wasn't supposed to exist just yet. My mother came over first. She had that look on her face, tight smile, hands raised like she was about to apologize for overcooking dinner, not for hijacking my house. "Oh, Ryan, we didn't expect you till Sunday," she said, voice syrupy. "We would have cleaned up." I looked past her at the mess. The living room was wrecked. My books shoved aside to make space for serving trays. Coats dumped across my desk. A sticky drink ring on top of my lab notes. That one hit harder than I expected. "Clearly," I said. Kevin tried to laugh it off, like this was all one big mix-up. "It was just a little get-together. Uncle Frank's retirement, we didn't want to bother you about it while you were off doing your science stuff." Science stuff. I didn't answer. Just walked down the hallway toward my room, past people I hadn't seen in years, cousins who barely remembered my name, neighbors who'd waved at me once and decided that counted as friendship. Everyone was suddenly real quiet. The kind of quiet that says you weren't supposed to see this. When I reached my bedroom door, it was open. The light was on, and someone else's suitcase was sitting on my bed. I stepped inside and just stared. The mattress had been stripped. My framed diplomas stacked in the corner. Half the closet emptied and filled with clothes that weren't mine. My nightstand drawer, the one I always keep locked, had been forced open. That's when I felt it. Not rage. Not yet. Just the slow, sinking sensation like the air in the room had been swapped out with something colder. I backed out of the room, walked back to the living room where Kevin and Mom were whispering near the kitchen. My voice was calm when I spoke. "Who's sleeping in my room?" Kevin blinked. "It's just for the weekend," he said. "Marissa's sister flew in. She needed a place to crash. My room. My bed. Without even asking." And then my mom chimed in with the kind of tone she reserves for scolding a child. "Ryan, you're barely here these days. It's not like you're using the space." I nodded. Not because I agreed, but because right then I saw it. This wasn't spontaneous. This was coordinated. And I had just walked into something much bigger than a party. The moment I heard, "You're barely here these days," I knew. This wasn't about a one-off party. This was a warm-up act. A test run. They'd already started writing me out of the script, they just didn't expect the actor to walk back on stage early. I didn't argue. I didn't ask more questions. I just left. Grabbed my bag, got in the car, and drove a few blocks down to the empty church parking lot where I used to sneak off to think as a teenager. Sat there for maybe 20 minutes, engine off, watching the orange glow of the streetlight flicker against the windshield. See, I used to believe that family, no matter how dysfunctional, would at least respect what you bring to the table. Maybe not celebrate it, maybe not understand it, but respect it. That belief died somewhere between the beer cooler in my dining room and the stranger unpacking a suitcase onto my bed. That house wasn't gifted to us, it was inherited. When Dad passed, everything got tied up in probate hell. Kevin wanted to sell it. I didn't. So I bought out half with my savings, took on the maintenance, paid the taxes, and let him stay on the other half for rent-free, mind you, because he was getting back on his feet. That was 2 years ago. I'd been quietly funding the roof he never fixed, the plumbing he never noticed, the bills he sometimes forgot. And still, they moved my things, threw a party, and let someone sleep in my room like I was just some Airbnb guest who'd overstayed his welcome. I headed back around midnight. The house had quieted down. Cars gone. Kitchen dim. I walked in through the side door and took stock of the wreckage, cups in the sink, confetti on the stairs, a shoe, just one, in the hallway. Classic Carter chaos. Kevin was passed out on the couch. Mom was gone. I made my way into the office, formerly Dad's den, now where I kept most of my research and personal files. I just needed one quiet place that still felt like mine. I clicked on the desk lamp. That's when I saw the drawer. It wasn't fully shut. Inside was a folder I didn't recognize. Thick. Dog-eared. Jammed behind some envelopes like it had been hurriedly stuffed away. Curiosity? Maybe. Instinct? Definitely. I pulled it out. Inside were financial statements, personal, not mine. Withdrawal notices. Denied loan applications. An account summary with my brother's name at the top and a balance that made my stomach turn. Tens of thousands. Gone. Then came the app receipts. DraftKings. FanDuel. PokerStars. Transaction after transaction bleeding cash into the void. And that's when it hit me. This wasn't about a party. This was about pressure. They weren't just borrowing my space. They were trying to cash me out. There's something twisted about finding out your family's betrayal from a printer jam. No metaphor, I mean that literally. The file I pulled from Kevin's mess of documents had print lines that were smudged, like the pages had gotten stuck, yanked out, and never reprinted. Sloppy. Desperate. Just like the man himself. The more I flipped through, the uglier it got. Payday loan rejections. Credit card cash advances. Account freezes. The guy was drowning and not quietly. He'd been throwing anchors at his own feet. And you know what really stuck out? Not the debt. Not even the apps. It was the dates. The first big spike of withdrawals? It hit right around the time he told me he'd just lost a freelance gig and needed help covering the utilities. I'd wired him $1,200 that night without thinking twice. The second wave? That was a week after Mom called crying, saying Kevin had fallen behind again and just needed a little runway. I Venmo'd her the amount without blinking. Figured it was for groceries or rent. Turns out I was just helping him chase losses. And apparently I wasn't doing it fast enough. There were notes in the margins, Kevin's handwriting, rushed and angry. Calculations. Payback estimates. A line that read, "If Ryan moves out, refi possible, $80,000 easy." He wasn't just broke. He was building a plan around me, specifically getting rid of me. I leaned back in the chair, folder still open in my lap. The house felt colder now, like the insulation itself had turned against me. My name was still on the deed. I paid the taxes. But somehow my brother thought I was the tenant he could evict for profit. And the worst part? He didn't even bother hiding the plan. Because he assumed I'd never find it. Because they never expected me to look. Because I was never supposed to come home early. That's when I heard it, footsteps upstairs. Not the loud kind. Careful ones. Quiet. And then a voice whispering. "Marissa. Kevin's wife." "Babe," she said through the floorboards. "What if he found it?" No response. More rustling. Then Kevin's voice, low and irritable. "He didn't. He's probably too busy being offended about the party." They were right about one thing. I was offended. But not in the way they expected. I wasn't about to scream. I wasn't going to fight. No, I had something better. I had proof. By morning, the house was silent in that strange, guilty way, like a crime scene that hadn't quite cooled yet. Kevin was still asleep on the couch when I came downstairs, eyes shut, one leg dangling off the edge like a kid caught playing sick to skip school. Marissa had already vanished. Probably fled before the fallout. I made coffee. Loudly. No one stirred. Then I sat at the kitchen table and waited. Not angrily, just present. The kind of quiet that makes people nervous because they know they owe you more than they're willing to give. Kevin finally sat up, rubbing his face like he'd had a long night instead of a cushy nap on my couch. "Hey," he mumbled, not quite looking at me. I just nodded. Let the silence do the heavy lifting. A full minute passed before he said, "Listen, about last night, sorry man. It just kinda came together last minute. Mom thought it'd be good to do something for Uncle Frank." I smiled just a little. "In my house." He blinked. "Yeah, but I mean, you're barely here. You've been traveling a lot. Mom said it'd be fine. That's twice now. You're barely here. Like that was a loophole in ownership. So you figured, throw a party, move someone into my room, and hope I didn't notice? He finally looked up at that. No one moved in, man. It was just one night. And the room, come on, it's not like you sleep there every week. You're always off at some lab or hospital. That's when I saw it, the shift. He wasn't trying to apologize. He was trying to justify. To reframe this like I was the one being dramatic. Like I had been inconvenient for showing up early to the home I partially own. You went through my stuff, Kev. That one hit. Not because he denied it, but because he didn't. He leaned back, scratched his chin. Look, I was trying to find the Wi-Fi password. I thought maybe you had it written down somewhere. The lie was so lazy it almost made me laugh. You mean the password you've used for 2 years? He didn't answer. I stood up, picked up my coffee, and started walking toward the stairs. Where are you going? He asked. Just locking my room, I said. Then I stopped halfway up and turned back. Oh, and Kev? Just so we're clear, the next time you print your little refinance fantasies, maybe don't leave them in my office. His face drained of color. And in that moment, I saw the real panic. Not because he'd been caught, but because he finally realized. I wasn't going to scream. I was going to act. You ever notice how the people who raised you can still talk to you like you're 5 years old even when they're the ones in the wrong? That was my mom. When I called and asked her to stop by the next morning, she showed up with pastries and that fake smile she uses when she's hoping I've already forgiven her for something she hasn't confessed to yet. She sat at the table like she always does, in the seat Dad used to call the war chair, the one you picked when you had something hard to say. I heard about last night, she said softly, tearing a croissant into perfect little pieces. Yeah, I said. Turns out there was a whole retirement party in my house I wasn't invited to. She sighed. Ryan, it was a mistake. No one meant to hurt you. There it was, the script. No accountability. No direct admission. Just soft tones and vague regret, the family brand of damage control. And the part where Kevin tried to replace me on the deed? I asked. Was that a mistake too? Her hands stopped moving. I watched her face carefully, but she didn't flinch the way guilty people do when they've just been blindsided. No, she went still in that specific way people do when they've been expecting the moment to come. Ryan, she said gently. Your brother is going through something. I blinked. You knew. She didn't say yes. She didn't have to. He told me he was trying to get help. That he needed some flexibility. He's under so much pressure and you're hardly ever. There it is, I cut in. That line again. You're hardly ever here. Like my absence is a green light to strip the copper out of the walls while I'm gone. Her voice got smaller. He's your brother. He just needs time. No, I said. He needs money. And apparently the plan was to gently shove me out and use my half of the house to buy himself another month in the hole. She closed her eyes. And in that moment I saw it, she wasn't shocked. She wasn't even ashamed. She was cornered. Because she'd helped him. Maybe not directly. But she'd been part of it, covering, excusing, nudging. All those times she guilted me into wiring money. All that he just needs time and he's figuring things out. Turns out it wasn't support, it was strategy. Well, I said, standing up. I hope you both enjoyed the party. Because the lease agreement goes into effect next week. She blinked. What lease agreement? I smiled. The one with the new property manager. I'll be renting out my half of the house. You wouldn't, she whispered. I would, I said. And I am. And when I walked her to the door, I didn't hug her. I just handed her the receipt for Kevin's latest failed loan application and said, you might want to give this back to him. He left it in my room. There's a funny thing about paperwork, people forget it doesn't care how loud you yell. A week later, Kevin stood in the driveway in flip-flops and gym shorts, holding a Red Bull and acting like I'd declared war just by acting like an owner. This is insane, Ryan, he said, waving the property manager's notice like it was radioactive. You're gonna rent out part of your own house to a stranger? I didn't even look up from the trunk of my car. I was folding the last of my button-downs into a duffel. Had a meeting with my attorney at noon. Another at the Swiss consulate right after. Yes, I said calmly. That's exactly what I'm doing. But I live here. You live in half. I own the other. But we're family. I zipped the bag shut and finally turned to face him. You mean I'm family when you need something? When you want a check or a signature or for me to be out of the way? But when it comes to boundaries? Or respect? Suddenly, I'm just barely here. He took a step closer, arms out like he was about to make some big heartfelt speech, but his face couldn't quite decide if it was angry or pathetic. I was gonna pay you back, he said. I had plans. I nodded. Yeah. I found your plans. The ones where I get pushed out so you can refinance and keep gambling without telling your wife you're broke. His face twisted. It wasn't like that. I leaned in just slightly. Then tell me, Kev, what was it like? He didn't answer. Just stood there, stuck between pride and panic. I walked past him and dropped the duffel into the back seat. The property manager, Grace, mid-30s, efficient as hell, was already pulling up behind me. She stepped out with a clipboard and a purpose. You must be Kevin, she said. I'm here to photograph the upstairs for the listing. Kevin looked like he'd swallowed a brick. The upstairs? He asked. That's my part. Nope, I said, tossing him a copy of the floor plan I'd marked up with my lawyer. Technically, I've got claim to the entire second floor. You're downstairs. Which is convenient, less noise for the tenant. He stared at the paper like it was in another language. But that's not fair. Neither was lying to your own brother for 6 months, I said. But hey, this isn't about fairness. It's about consequences. As Grace walked inside, Kevin slumped onto the front steps like a deflated lawn decoration. I didn't feel sorry for him. Not one bit. Because the thing about gambling? Eventually, the house always wins. And in this case, I was the house. I always thought leaving would feel like running away. Turns out it felt like release. 2 weeks after the showdown on the porch, I was on a flight to Geneva, first-class seat, one bag overhead, another under my feet, and a brand-new contract folded in my coat pocket. 6 figures. Fully funded research. State-of-the-art oncology lab with a view of the Alps. Switzerland didn't just want me, they valued me. And after everything that happened back home, that word meant more than money ever could. When the plane touched down, I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't post a victory photo or text anyone a smug update. I just exhaled. The kind of breath you take when the weight isn't on your chest anymore, it's behind you. Kevin had gone quiet since the property manager moved the tenant in. Grace told me he tried to bluff her about ownership, claimed he was contesting the lease. She shut that down fast. Her lawyer sent over the title records, the court-filed agreement, the notarized floor plan. Apparently, he hasn't brought it up again. He's still living there, from what I hear. Same couch. Same downstairs unit. Only now there's a graduate student living upstairs, an actual adult with rent receipts and boundaries. She emailed once to ask if she could install better Wi-Fi and if I preferred she water the plants. I told her yes and yes. My mother tried calling after I left. Twice. I didn't pick up. The third time she left a voicemail. She didn't apologize. She didn't mention Kevin. She just said, I hope you're doing well. Geneva must be beautiful this time of year. That's her way, emotional sleight of hand. Pretend the past never happened and hope you're tired enough not to correct the record. But I kept the message. Not out of sentiment. Out of study. Because that's what this all became to me, a study in survival. And how quiet betrayal can be. How it doesn't always come with screaming matches or slammed doors. Sometimes it shows up as birthday cake in your living room, a stranger in your bed, and a family that smiles while they erase you. But the thing is, they didn't finish the job. Because I got out. And I didn't just save myself. I reclaimed myself. Switzerland is quiet in a way that feels earned. People speak softly. Trains arrive to the second. Even the air feels calibrated, clean, deliberate, like someone scrubbed the chaos out of the atmosphere before I arrived. And yet, the ghost still followed. Not the scary kind. The slow kind. The kind that whisper at you while you're brushing your teeth or staring at the Alps from your research office. You should have seen it sooner. You should have fought harder. You should have known better. I didn't miss Kevin. But I missed the version of Kevin I thought still existed, the one who called me big bro when his first girlfriend dumped him, the one who couldn't even drive stick until I taught him in Dad's old Civic. I missed my mother too, but in a different way. Not the woman who dismissed me with, "You're barely here." I missed the one who used to mail me peanut brittle in college because she thought Swiss chocolate was too smug. But those versions didn't live in that house anymore. Now, Kevin lived downstairs, clinging to a last name he'd nearly bet away. And Mom, well, she was probably still telling herself it wasn't her fault. That she stayed out of it. That all families have complications. Meanwhile, I joined a team that actually asked me what I thought. A team that gave me a key card, not a guilt trip. I was working on a clinical study that might save lives, and for once, I didn't feel like I had to apologize for the hours I kept or the flights I took. Still, when I passed a mirror, I'd catch a look in my own eyes I hadn't seen before. Not rage. Not sadness. Watchfulness. That's what betrayal leaves you with. Not scars. Sensors. It trains you to read people faster, listen for the lie behind the laugh, count the exits in every room. You don't stop trusting, you just stop trusting blindly. But I wasn't bitter. I was aware. And that, more than anything, is what saved me. Not the money. Not the move. Awareness. Because back when they were scheming to force me out, they made one fatal mistake. They underestimated the quiet one in the room. And now? That room was mine. 6 months into Geneva, I'd finally stopped checking my old inbox. The one tied to family, utility bills, group threads I no longer opened. But on a cold Thursday night, while waiting for lab results to process, muscle memory took over. I opened it. There it was. Subject line. From Kevin. Timestamp, 2:03 a.m. back home. I stared at it for a full minute. My first instinct? Trash it. Second instinct? Forward it to no one. Because who even is the person you forward something like this to? Then I clicked. Ryan. I don't know why I'm writing this now. Maybe because it's late. Maybe because there's nothing left to lose. I was addicted. Not just the gambling. The escape. The idea that one big win would fix everything. And when it didn't, I panicked. I looked around and saw the one person who always bailed me out. And I thought, if I could just push you out of the way, I could finally stop being the screw-up. I didn't realize until too late that I wasn't pushing you out, I was pulling us all down. I know what we did. I know how Mom defended it. I know how Marissa kept quiet. We used you. And you didn't even fight. You just left. But the way you left made it impossible to ignore. I'm in debt again. Worse than before. The tenant upstairs doesn't talk to me. Mom barely visits. I just wanted you to know. Not because I expect forgiveness. But because I don't want to lie to myself about it anymore. You didn't deserve what we did. I see that now. Kevin. I sat there, rereading it once. Then twice. No rage. No satisfaction. Just sadness. The kind you feel when you finally realize the house fire wasn't accidental, it was arson. And the ones holding the matches were the people who called you family. I didn't reply. What do you even say to a man who tried to sell your silence? I just closed the laptop, walked to the window, and looked out at a city that hadn't betrayed me. The mountains were still there. So was the life I built. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I'd escaped. I felt like I'd survived. Funny thing about survival, people think it's about clinging on. But it's not. It's about knowing what to let go of and, more importantly, what to keep. After Kevin's email, I didn't spiral. I didn't draft a long response or call my mother or rehash everything I'd already dissected 100 times. I went to work. I ran the trial results. I helped a patient and her husband understand a new treatment protocol. I lived my life. Because what they tried to take from me, it wasn't a house. It wasn't money. It was certainty. That quiet belief that you're safe in the places that raised you. And once that's gone, you don't get it back. But you do learn to build something sturdier. Switzerland had given me that. Not just in contracts and credentials, but in rhythm. In the slow, earned comfort of knowing no one was coming through my door with a false apology and a new excuse. The house back home? It was still standing. Physically, anyway. I got occasional updates from Grace, the property manager. The upstairs tenant had renewed for another 6 months. Paid early, never complained. Kevin, meanwhile, had started missing water bills. The bank had called me once, asking about a suspicious refinancing inquiry. I shut that down fast. Kevin still hadn't learned that ownership doesn't mean access. And guilt doesn't mean leverage. My mother hadn't written again. But Marissa, his wife, sent a message out of the blue. Short. To the point. I've moved out. I'm sorry I didn't speak up sooner. You didn't deserve what happened. That was all. And it was more than I expected. I saved the message, then did what I always do when the past tries to tap me on the shoulder. I went back to work. The new project we'd launched, targeted immunotherapy, was in its early stages. A long road ahead. Full of setbacks. Delays. Uncertainty. But I didn't flinch from it. Because once you've rebuilt yourself from the ground up, you stop being afraid of the process. People always talk about karma like it's some cosmic hammer, like lightning waiting to strike the worst person in the worst way. But in my experience, karma is quiet. It's structural. It's watching someone dig a hole for you and then forget to check where the edge ends. Kevin was the architect of his own collapse. I just stepped out of the blueprint. 6 months after my tenant moved in, I got another update from Grace. There was an incident. Turns out Kevin had been trying to sabotage the upstairs plumbing. Claimed it was too loud, wanted her out. Grace caught him turning off the water valve, then lying about it. The tenant filed a complaint. He tried to play victim. Didn't go well. I forwarded the entire report to our attorney, the one who had structured the ownership split. A clause in our agreement let me assume temporary sole management rights if property sabotage was documented. Within 48 hours, Kevin's access to the second floor was legally revoked. He was still in the house, But now he couldn't touch a thermostat or a lock upstairs without breaking the law. Karma wasn't just knocking, it had changed the locks. Meanwhile, the tenant? Still paying early. Still kind. She emailed asking if I was okay after hearing about the incident. Said she hoped whoever was causing the trouble found peace. That kind of grace doesn't show up in family, apparently. But it does show up where respect lives. My mother hadn't called since my return email, which, by the way, was only 6 words. I'm fine. I hope Kevin is too. No sarcasm. No malice. Just a mirror. Let them reflect on it. I wasn't playing their game anymore. They tried to make me the villain for drawing a boundary. For defending what I'd earned. But here's the truth about boundaries. The people who complain the loudest about them are the ones who benefited most from you having none. Not the house. Not the title. Not even the silence I used to fill every phone call with so I wouldn't say what I really felt. What I took with me was clarity. See, when you grow up in a family like mine, love gets tangled up with obligation. Saying no is treated like betrayal. And if you dare protect your peace, suddenly you're the problem. For most of my life, I thought love meant loyalty even when loyalty felt like self-destruction. But Geneva taught me something different. Love, a real love, has boundaries. It respects doors. It knocks before entering. It asks instead of assuming. It doesn't sell your trust for an app notification and a quick fix. Back home, Kevin had once told me family takes care of family. What he meant was family takes advantage of the ones who won't fight back. So I fought back. Not with fists. Not with screaming matches or dramatic ultimatums. With paperwork. With proof. With dignity. And I won. Not the petty kind of win where someone else loses and you get the last word. No, I won by walking away with everything they said I'd never have without them. Stability. Purpose. Peace. I thought I'd be angry forever. That what they did would harden me. Make me cold. But that's the thing about betrayal, it doesn't turn you bitter unless you feed it. And I stopped feeding it the moment I stepped on that plane. I built something they couldn't touch. Because while they were busy planning how to replace me, I was already becoming someone they'd never understand. And that's the kind of win that doesn't need an audience. The funny thing is, I still remember the creak in the second stair. The one Kevin and I used to leap over like it was lava when we were kids. I remember the shape of the hallway shadows when we snuck back and past curfew. The chipped corner of the banister Dad refused to fix because it builds character. That house had a heartbeat once. Yeah? It's just drywall and resentment. I got the listing notice last week. Kevin's finally trying to sell his half. He's behind on more bills. The tenant renewed for another year. Apparently she teaches statistics and makes more sense than anyone else who's ever lived under that roof. Grace forwarded Kevin's request to buy out my share. I didn't even hesitate. Declined. Not out of spite. Out of principle. Because after all the lies, all the gaslighting, all the family dinners that turned into silent blamefests, he still thinks he deserves an easy out. Still thinks I'll hand him a parachute while he lights the plane on fire. Let him stew in the consequences. Let him explain to the next person why his name is only half on the deed and none on the lease. I've moved on. Geneva isn't just a place now, it's a boundary. A clean slate with altitude and purpose and the kind of quiet that doesn't hum with guilt. I walk to work along the lake. I sip espresso without checking for messages from people who once called me selfish for needing space. I study cells under a microscope while knowing exactly how betrayal metastasizes. It starts small. One lie. One favor. One skipped apology. Then it spreads. Until you forget you ever had rights in the first place. But not me. Not anymore. Because now, when I look back at that house, all I see is the moment I walked out and never looked back. It hit me on an otherwise normal Tuesday. No dramatic moment. No final phone call. No envelope with a handwritten plea. I was walking out of the lab, sun just beginning to fall behind the mountains when I realized I hadn't thought about them all day. Not Kevin. Not Mom. Not the house. Nothing. And for someone whose every heartbeat used to carry a flicker of what did I miss, what did they say, what happens next, that silence felt like peace. Earned peace. There was a time when I thought closure meant confrontation. That someone would sit me down and say, we were wrong. You didn't deserve that. But that apology never came. And it doesn't have to. Because here's the secret no one tells you. Closure doesn't come from their confession. It comes from your decision. The decision to stop bleeding for people who treat your presence like a transaction. To stop trying to be reasonable in a room full of users. To stop handing out grace where there's only extraction. I didn't just lose a family dynamic. I shed an identity, the fixer, the peacekeeper, the reliable one. I became someone else. Someone with a research paper being peer-reviewed across 3 continents. Someone who goes home to silence, not surveillance. Someone who looks in the mirror and doesn't flinch. Kevin still hasn't emailed again. Mom hasn't called. And the house? Still split down the middle just like the family that grew up in it. But me? I'm whole. Not because they gave me anything, but because I finally stopped giving them everything. And that's the real twist of this whole story. They tried to get rid of me. But in the end, I let go of them.